Hello and welcome to this week's first edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko, and on the show tonight, Fourth-year Vice-Chancellor Professor Sakela Buhlungu returns to work after a failed assassination attempt that created panic among the institution's staff and students. He is my first guest. Decades under Ais Makhashula's rule, the ANC in the Free State has elected a new provincial leadership. But can incoming chairperson Xolisi Dukwana free the party from Makhashula's grip and influence? He joins me later on the program. The Watchdog starts now. Earlier this month, the Fort-Hare community was plunged into shock and fear after an attempted murder on the varsity's vice-chancellor resulted in the death of his bodyguard as investigations into the matter continue. Professor Sakela Buhlungu today returned to work. He joins me now via Zoom. Good evening, Prof. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo. Thanks for inviting me. Just a correction, I came back to the university on the 3rd of January.
Okay, all right. So how has it been, Prof? I mean, after the dramatic events?
Look, it's been hell. It's been hell itself. It's been an absolute shocker. It's the sort of thing that we never thought would happen. And what makes it worse is that this clearly was intended at taking me and the driver out, both of us. And as you can imagine, it happened next to the house, which is about 10 meters from where I'm sitting, just outside the wall. That's where the shooting happened. We'd had a full day that day, dropped me off. He was coming to park the car and then get on with his weekend, and they ambushed him and killed him. And I've never heard of anything of this kind, but there have been signs. There have been signs. We are in mourning still. We are absolutely distraught, and I'm talking not just about me or talking about the university community. Most importantly, I'm talking about his family, his wife, his children, and the rest of the Vesile and extended family. And of course, I think the shock waves have gone beyond the university and the family. They have affected the Alice community, the Eastern community, Ginsberg, where Mr. Vesile had his home. Yeah, it's a shocker. And I've received messages from across the world. So once again, the shock waves have not ended in South Africa. It's a global thing because he is known, but I'm also known by people beyond the borders of the country.
May Mr. Vesile's soul rest in peace, indeed. But just going back, Prof, you're saying the signs have been there. Take us through those. What exactly has been happening? Okay,
I'll cut a very long story very short, Vuyo. The more immediate signs that pointed in the direction of possible assassination started on the 17th of March last year, when shots were fired into the house of one of our deputy vice chancellors here in Alice, not far next to where I live, and one of the bullets went into the house, landed near the fridge. Fortunately, she was in bed at that time. The following day, they came and shot fires at the VC's house, which is where I live. On the 30th of that month, still they fired shots at the house of my manager in the VC's office. And of course, on the 19th of May, Mr. Roots, Petrus Roots, our fleet manager, was assassinated at daytime at a crossing on his way to home in Gunubi. So yes, these things have been there. And what shocked me, and then I think what also makes us very, 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 I don't want to say scared, but what makes us very unhappy is the fact that we've been crying in the wilderness, and we've had very little kind of by way of response, reassurance, and support. And I want to repeat that because some people have said, oh, I sent someone there, sent someone there. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about authorities giving us a call, reassuring, providing support. With Mr. Roots, it was as if a fly had died. It was as if a fly had died. Nothing. And the case investigation took 9 months, and still no one has been apprehended. And yet the killers are now known. I can tell you that. The killers are now known. So when this happened, with this time, I decided to pitch the call and the cry straight to the top authority in the land, namely the president. And it was not because of disrespect for ministers. And I know some ministers are fragile, they don't want to be bypassed. But this time people are dying. I have no time for people with fragile egos. This is very, very important. People are dying. That's what it is. And I don't want a third person to die. Fortunately, I was able to talk to people and made contact with the president. President dispatched ministers and the Deputy Minister of Intelligence to come, and we had very fruitful interactions. I focused my own interactions with Minister Kele. As I said to him, Minister, I'm coming to you because you've got the jail keys. Use them. Use the jail keys. Take people, throw them in jail. Any hot air, any promises, any platitudes are not going to wash with us. And I still repeat, that's our view at the moment. Take someone and put them in jail. That's how I'll have the confidence to reassure our students, our staff, and our broad university community.
Do you feel, Prof, that you're being failed by state law enforcement agencies, in particular the police? Absolutely failed. I don't even want to talk. The least said about the police station in Analysts, the better. The least said about it, absolutely, the better. We've reported many cases beyond this one. Forget about them. And I'm talking about the province also. We've been failed. There are other cases of theft of graft that the first one being in 2018. Nothing has happened out of it. And so we've been failed. And when I spoke to the president, I said, President, we live in a small corner, in a rural corner of the country, but we're running a very important historic institution. You're not going to let us be wiped out in silence, away from the public eye. Do something. Do something. I welcome the ministers that you're sending, but we want to have a face-to-face with the minister. And we already have a delegation that will see the president, the chairperson of council, Bishop Ivan Abrams, the Chancellor of the University, Advocate Dumisa Nsebeza, myself, the Deputy Chairperson of Council, a Deputy Vice Chancellor, and another senior official. That's what we want to do, because it's very clear. If you live in a small town, away from the public eye, away from the televisions, you can die, and people get away with it. And that's when and we're saying now it's not going to happen. It is not going to happen. Now, have you been able to put a finger on it, though? I mean, Prof, in other words, is it ineptitude, on the part of the police, or could they be in cahoots with the perpetrators of, these crimes? Have you been able to get a better sense of why they are not doing what they're supposed to do?
Let me put it this way. Let me put it this way. We've done our own kind of layperson's work on the ground. And where there are dots, we've identified those dots. But most importantly, we've handed over most of the information that could lead the state to deal with these matters. Okay? So that's the one thing. So it's not as if there's no pointers, there are no indications, and nothing shared. Down to statements, sworn statements, by Mr. Roots, for example, who was threatened by a person, a known person. We gave all of those statements. So for me, it's a combination of all of the above. There's ineptitude, There's absolute irredeemable ineptitude. Some of those people don't belong to law enforcement agencies at all. But there's also malicious thing where I suspect, now this is me speaking, I suspect, as they say, if you throw bread in somebody's mouth, then they keep quiet. If you throw meat in somebody's mouth, I suspect that there have been cases where pieces of meat were thrown into some people's mouths and then they kept shut and they sat on the cases. But most importantly, because people think that we live in a small corner of the world, they can ignore us. And what we're saying, they are not going to ignore us. We've been let down. I don't want to give you the list of people who've let us down. But that's exactly what it has been. We have authorities who've never said a word, who've never made a call, who've never done anything. So if we don't do this, this university is going to die, and it's unfortunately, we are not going to allow it to die on our hands, not under our watch. The authorities, the president needs to pay attention. And again, I must emphasize, it's one thing to send a contingent of ministers with blue lights and black cars coming along and invading the streets and so on and so forth. That's well and good. We want people behind behind bars. That's what we want. We want people behind bars. That's all that we want. Because what happens is that if they do nothing, these people get emboldened and then they shoot some more. And I can tell you now, Vuyo, 3 days ago, there was an attempt to kill yet another official on campus, a junior official who was caught by 4 armed men on campus in Alice. 4 heavily armed men. They grabbed him. They put tape. They basically muzzled him with duct tape. They tied his hands and feet. They put him in his apartment. They locked him away. And the plan was to leave him there to die. So this is now, I'm telling you, this is about three days ago, or maybe 4 days ago. So this is not fiction. We've had police officers that have been used, an army of them, to set up roadblocks, bogus roadblocks for our staff, to rough them up and so on. So it's very clear. It's a combination of a whole lot of things. And we've been let down. I want to put it very, very publicly. We've been let down by people who should know better.
Now, Prof. Let's go back to, some of the things that happened, which led you, getting the SIU involved. You applied for and got the proclamations by the president so that these matters can be investigated. We tried last week, in fact, after that incident, after the death of Mr. Vesela, to get the SIU to come on and give us an update of where investigations are and so on, which they declined. They said some of the investigations were at a sensitive stage and they're not comfortable at this stage to talk about it. But just by way of background, some of these big cases, what did they involve? What sort of monies are we talking about? And the profile of the people who would have direct interest in getting you or any other member of your staff killed?
Thank you very much. Let me start with the SIU thing, because there's a lot of misconception and mischief around it. The SIU was doing its own investigation, and I use the metaphor of drilling. They were drilling in from the outside because they had some indication of some fraudulent activities. It just so happened that we were also drilling from the inside out. And then we decided, let's combine, let's work together. Rather than one small drill, let's buy one big drill and work together. Signed an MOU. They came and did a preliminary research on information. Then they presented the thing to the provincial, to the national director, to Minister of Justice, and ultimately to the president. That's what happened. So in that sense, we work. It's unprecedented in this country that an institution will voluntarily invite and work with an institution such as the SIU. That's one. Secondly, and very importantly, there's some mischief that's being spread around that we're not wanting to share information about. The SIU reports to no one else but the president. A nice try for you, Vuyo, and your channel to try and speak. They are not going to give you information. They are not going to give me information. They are not going to give no ministers no information. They're going to give that information only to the president. That's who they are accountable to. They came to us as management. They came and addressed our council. They made it very clear that what they're doing, because it may happen that some of us are actually subject of those investigations. It may happen that somebody else is also subject of that investigation. So they will report only to the president. So anyone who says Forte is hiding information from the SIU, that is mischief, and they're not telling the truth. They must go to the president if they want information, but the president will tell you that investigation is still ongoing. So that's the one thing. Now you're asking me what sort of issues? These are big issues. Crooked contracts. There was one that was signed, a crooked contract signed in 2012, which went way beyond the acceptable kind of legal limit that a university council could sign. It was supposed to be 9 months, 9 years, 11 months. But that contract was made to be 15 years. Very expensive. So one of my jobs coming in was basically to fight that and pull back and reduce that contract to the acceptable legal kind of limit, which we managed to do, which is why we were able for the first time to get a clean audit for 2021. So those are some of the things that these crooked contracts, some of these crooked behaviors, and some of the crooked people that have been sitting here before. You know, I always ask this question, Vuyo, and now there's all of this hullabaloo about Forte and so on. I'm saying to them, these things were happening all the time. I only got here on the 1st of February 2017. Why were people not doing it? Why were people not investigating? Why were people not asking questions? Perhaps it's time now that someone goes to the people who were there before me, my predecessors, ask them these questions. Tough. Bring them here on national television. Ask them, why these crooked contracts? Why this? Why is the thing about the Nguni kettle? All of these other things. Why the thing about, for example, a very crooked fleet department? And so on and so forth. Then perhaps we will get closer, and you as the media will get closer to the truth. Mine is simply, I was told by the Department of Higher Education that one contract from 2012 is illegal. That's what they said to me from the start. I said, give me time. We'll get it right. And we did get it right. But there are many others. And so it's very, very important for people to understand. And the independent assessors that were appointed some time back by Minister Pando, they made it very clear that graft and corruption and fraud here had been going on for decades, And the point is, therefore, this great institution, this iconic institution of ours, we actually, on the one hand, we praise it and so on and so forth. On the other hand, we're basically milking it. People have been milking Forte for many years, and that is the issue. And now that there's SIU, people are excited, people are scared, people are trying to save their skin, and I suppose some of them want to kill the evidence by killing people. The strategy that they've adopted is to target anyone who is close to me, and because they think I'm the only person. I have a full executive, most competent executive. That is the collective thing, all the things that we do. So that's where we are. But I want to underline, go and ask the ones who were there before us. Go ask them, what were they doing about these crooked contracts?
Now, Prof, I mean, is it an exaggeration to say, because from the cursory reading of some of the reports, it looks like, I mean, virtually every aspect of the university's life and business, is affected. In other words, we're talking about multi-million rand contracts, but we're also talking about much smaller contracts like gardening and so on. But no area has been spared, it would appear.
Look, let me put it this way, and you're probably right, going back, but let me put it this way. We, for a few years now, we've embarked on what we call renewal, the decade of renewal, 2020, 2030. We've clamped down very hard on some of those behaviors and on some of those people involved. Okay, so that's what's been happening. But some of the crooked ways were built into contracts that were signed long before our time. And so it's taking us a lot of time, but there's a lot of pushback. I must tell you, there's been a lot of pushback. There's been a lot of pushback. One of the reasons, and people say, oh, it's not all of Forte. The rest of Forte is steaming ahead. It's a good institution. It's led by a very competent kind of team of administrators. And all the way, the academic enterprise has received praise. We're getting ratings internationally now, Times Higher Education and so on and so forth. We're getting a clean audit. So all of that, we've managed now to ring fence the problem areas. It's these historic contracts, as well as the issue to do with that professor or that bogus professor who was running his own show in Bishop. That is the issue. Again, I'm saying bogus professor because that meant the only qualification that they had was a PhD, but they managed to get into the system. And they were there milking the university for many years and basically running it like an empire, bringing people without qualifications or without meeting the requirements. So that's what we've done. So if you come to Forte now, and thank goodness, the Council on Higher Education in October came to do a review of the institution. They were absolutely very, very excited about the work that we're doing. They're commending, doing all these things against all the odds. And we're waiting for that report, and we will share it publicly, because that report is a testament to the amount of work, the amount of kind of building, of revitalization that we've done. So that's where we are now. I don't want, therefore, people to walk away with this and Forte is a mess. There was a headline the other day, Forte, whatever, under siege. We're not under siege. The only thing that's under siege, there are a few hired assassins who are killing people. That's the siege. And the police know them. The police are not catching them. That's all. That really is all. Otherwise, everything else, we're admitting students. We've had unprecedented applicants for year 2023. 219,000 applicants want to come to Forte, and 76% of them chose Forte as the first institution, or as an institution of choice, of first choice. So we don't have a problem. And I want to also underline, when we advertise positions, we get people from all over, from the big universities, from small universities, and internationally. So there's no crisis here. There's no crisis. And some people therefore want to do this. There's absolutely no crisis.
Now, Prof, I mean, just judging by the extent to which culprits have been able to, literally get away with murder, and that read together with some of the people who undeservingly, obtained or tried to obtain degrees at the university. One wonders to what extent politicians may also be in cahoots with criminals.
Okay, let me put it this way, Buyo. It's a web, like a spider's web. There are people internally, and many of them we've caught in the act. Okay, but also there are people externally. Some of them service providers of various sorts, from big to small. Taxis here, small buses there, a trip here, and so on and so forth. And then thirdly, there are people who are politically connected, who are involved. Let's face it. One person the other day calls me and he says, I did not like the statement you made about politicians. I said, I'm not going to withdraw it because we've passed information on to the law enforcement authorities, and some of those people are politicians. They're politicians. So if for as long as we're skirting around the issues, we're dancing around, we're not going to deal with this issue. I should also add, Vuyo, that this, and as some people have correctly stated this point, this is not just at Fort Hare, but Fort Hare, the capture of Fort Hare seems to have been the deepest. If it has not come to the other university and the other one, it's coming. It is coming. Dean of Education, Dean of Humanities, was shot dead by criminals, assassins at the University of Zululand a few years ago. And you can expect this trend to expand. And I'm disappointed sometimes when we speak, we make it forte, shameful. We're not shameful, no, but we're not here for pity. We're doing our job. And some people come on the side, they say, let's do a political solution. There's no political solution with assassins and thieves. There's no political solution. The government must do its job. As I've said before, we are bona fide citizens of South Africa. We are here to stay. Our institution is 106 years old. It deserves better than this. It deserves better than this.
Well, from conversations with other VCs, Prof. Laxet, Rhodes, Nelson Mandela, KZN that you mentioned, what are the key concerns there? What do they think of this problem and the trend that has been set here clearly?
If I was not on TV, Vuyo, I was going to say, pass, ask the next question. But because we're on TV, I'll tell you what has happened. And this is a phenomenon that goes back to fees must fall and then how we responded to COVID and so on. Institutions of higher learning are very much inward looking. Okay? Inward looking also in a context where resources and the block grant is diminishing for all sorts of. Everyone is focusing on their own. We have not seriously, honestly, frankly opened up the discussion as a sector-wide decision. I might even put it this way: that we've paid lip service as a sector, as an association of vice chancellors, because everyone is looking after themselves at the moment. Everyone is trying to survive. Everyone is trying to kind of brag about how great they are in this context, and therefore we forget that we are one sector. We're dealing with the same cohort of young people for the same, to producing skills for the same economy.
Isn't it someone's responsibility to have a bird's eye view and to really run with these things where, as you say, as vice chancellors, because of all the challenges that you're facing, perhaps these challenges being beyond your control in certain instances. I'm thinking of the Minister of Higher Education, for example, as that person who will make sure that the center holds. Now, in other words, while you're inward looking, they are able to zoom in on the problems.
Okay, let's put it this way. The Minister of Higher Education has been here twice. He came the last week, Wednesday, to the university and met with members of council and other people. He came again to attend the funeral. To his credit, so he's been there. But I think there's something that's eroding very rapidly, and that the members of the public don't necessarily always understand. Universities are autonomous bodies. Universities are autonomous bodies. We get government money, then we must run universities, and then there's regular reporting cycles on how we use that money and how we're keeping. And so I think, as I said, there's that kind of division, therefore. There's the minister, who's the kind of overall overseer, then there's the councils, then there's the executive managements, and then the rest of us. And that is very important to understand. The principle of autonomy requires that we, who are employed to run the university, I find it's not like the system of old when we were kids, of school inspectors. It doesn't work like that. In school inspectors, when they used to come, they would get all the food and everything would be cleaned up and so on and so forth. It does not work like that. Here, it is our job, and we are made accountable. We provide annual report, media report, financial report, all kinds of other reports. So, from that point of view, the department is there holding up the center. And the department, let's be frank and be fair to the department, they're never going to be able to chase criminals away. They're not going to be able. They can provide support, they can provide all sorts of facilitation and so on and so forth, but it's just not in their domain. It's not possible for them to then come in and get involved. besides, we will all get entangled with this problem of institutional autonomy. Institutional autonomy is something very, very, very important. And I think that the media needs to understand this, because sometimes people put ministers in an invidious position. They ask them questions that are operational, that are not even council matters that are executive management matters. And so for me, the ideal is for us to separate and be able to be fair to all of these parties when we ask questions. So if there are things that are being stolen, money that's kind of bleeding, and so on, in the first instance, it's our job. And whenever we discover an instance, we do write formal notification to the national department. We do that all the time. So, and I don't want us therefore to walk away here and say, oh, minister didn't this or minister didn't do that. The minister is doing it within the parameters set out in the Higher Education Act, and of course, which is then further elaborated in our own various institutional statutes. So there's Agangomhloli. He's not a school inspector, he's a minister.
Okay, he'll be my guest tomorrow, by the way. Prof, let me thank you so much for your time. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for you.
Professor Sakele Buhlungu, the Vice Chancellor of Fort Hare University. Now, after decades under Ace Magashula's rule, the ANC in the Free State has elected a new provincial leadership. Up next, I speak with Mr. Mkolisi Dugwana, the new chairperson of the ANC in the Free State. After decades under Ace Magashula's rule, the ANC in the Free State this past weekend elected a new provincial leadership. The chairperson of the ANC in the Free State, Mkolisi Dugwana, joins me on the line. Mr. Dugwana, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Congratulations are in order.
Thank you and good evening, Mr. Mfoko.
Well. Where are you even going to begin?
Where we should begin. I'll hear from you.
Well, I mean, we know the situation that has been happening in that province. It has been divided down the middle. The ANC leadership that came to address you at the weekend alluded to this. So you've got your work cut out for you, basically. So where are you going to begin, is my question.
Well, thank you. It's a known fact that for a very long time, this province was under a spell of a cult personality, and not because the person was that powerful, but also because it created space for patronage to undermine the capacities of individuals to an extent that people without requisite skills, capacities, etc., found themselves going up the ladder, and many people who had everything that is needed, whether political or administrative, finding themselves in the wilderness. And that created a space where fear ruled and patronage became the order of the day. And that also led to many other things, especially your activist, very capable activist sidelined, professional people who were capable dismissed or reduced to absolutely nothing. And it led to a state of despondency, a state of lawlessness, and a state where people did not know where they were going or coming. And people became hopeless as a result. And only those who were prepared to do what they were told, even if it was wrong, survived. So the way we need to begin is to make sure that the leadership that comes in with a purpose, is directed properly, and knows what needs to happen, especially with regard to itself. It's self-aware and does not allow prejudice, does not allow ego, does not allow itself to go out and making sure that they cause misery to the people instead of serving. So we need to deal with the leadership of the PEC first, as well as the branches of the ANC, make them to be relevant branches. But for that to happen, you need quality membership, and you need to make sure that you have cadres that are relevant for the challenges that are facing our communities, and they can respond to this. We need, for instance, people who are prepared to learn, people who are prepared to unlearn those things that are not working and relearn new things for our society to move on.
Now, I know that it may be too soon, given that, I mean, the conference was only this past weekend. But do you think that, because, I mean, the fights were real going into the weekend conference. Do you think now that it's all over, a new leadership has emerged, is there a recognition by all and sundry that what is important now is to focus on the tasks ahead? In other words, where you were talking about, rebuilding the ANC in the province, but as a consequence of the infighting, sidelining people, the patronage you were talking about, I mean, municipalities have collapsed in the province. So is there a recognition after this conference that the focus now has to shift to doing the things that need to be done going forward?
Too many people in the province, they see this as a break, and they believe that it will, as the break from what has been happening in the past, and a breath of fresh air. But this will also be short-lived if we are not going to engage our communities, professionals, business people, etc., and all the stakeholders to begin to say, let's actually define the free state we want, the kind of the province we want together, so that we work and we are responsible for its rebirth. And it should not be only leadership that thinks that they know what the free state needs to be like, but it should be owned, the purpose that is owned by all of us, the purpose that is bigger than all of us, and that can outlive us and also can lay a better foundation for many young people and generations to come. And this is the kind of a free state that when we meet, we are able to define that any other person you meet will be able to tell you where we're all going, because we have agreed and we are driven by a purpose that we have all set ourselves. So this is something that I think is doable, and only if we set ourselves in doing it, if we can spend less time in looking inward and more time dealing with issues that are pertinent, important, and that are relevant to building a better society. So we spend more time arguing about non-issues and issues that are only self-serving, and instead of focusing in what is important for the people, in driving. There are people who do not have water, people who are actually facing the smell of raw sewer in the streets, schools that are not clean, toilets that are not functioning, people who have buckets still, even now, in an area, for instance, in Motshabelo, still we have about 33,000 people, even when we had money to deal with the bucket system. But other priorities where people would rather have the honeysuckers moving in because their personal interest in what these honeysuckers are, as opposed to the interest of the good of all the people. and their priorities are not right. So we need to really refocus our people, the leadership and everybody in what is important, and energies should be directed towards that. With that, I'm definitely sure we will turn the ship around.
Yeah, and I'm asking this question. I was asking that question because what often happens, after such the kind of contestation we saw in the run-up to this elective provincial conference is that those who win at the end of the day at times become triumphalists. And on the other hand, you have those who would have lost pushing back, in an attempt to, claw their way back. So it becomes important. And with this kind of thing, people were saying at the weekend, it's the Free State now. We also have the case in KwaZulu-Natal where you have these two centers of power in both provinces. In your case, for example, as the chairperson, you are not the premier. In fact, I think you're probably the only person in the current executive who is now, I'm talking about the government now, who is part of the new leadership. The next question is going to be, what's going to happen? Are you going to become, the premier? What happens to those members of the provincial cabinet who didn't make it to, who didn't win? Those who are contesting these leadership positions. So that is going to bring a lot of uncertainty. There's going to be more fights. How are you going to handle that?
This question is not supposed to be dealt with mechanically. But at the same time, we should not be avoiding reality in dealing with this issue. And in this case, you look at what are these two centers of power doing. If these centers are able to function properly together in addressing issues that they are supposed to do, government doing what it's supposed to do, the party doing what it's supposed to do, then there is no problem in the existence of the two centers. But the problem comes when you have government or those who are in government doing everything else to frustrate those who are not in government and making sure they use the resources to fight their own battle instead of serving the communities. Then that creates a problem. And I believe that what the PEC will do would look into this matter, apply its mind correctly, and arrive at a determination that would be in the best interest of the people of the province. And that is something that would have to be determined at the right time, and looking at all the aspects that need to be looked at. It's not just waking up and saying, this is what we need to do, but it's applying yourself correctly and coming up with something that would work for the people of the Free State. If, for instance, we would find that it is in the best interest of the people of the Free State to do a change in government, especially in the Executive Council, it must be done. But if it actually is not necessary, the PEC will say it's not necessary. So I'm saying it should not be seen as purging, but also you're not going to create a situation where people will be afraid to act because they would be seen as purging others. Any member of the ANC, there's no member of the ANC who's guaranteed any position. These positions are not these members. I'm not an MEC because I'm better than any other person, and I'm deployed there. If the ANC feels that my deployment in the executive is not serving the desired objective, and they remove me, they do. I've been removed several times, and I did not see that as purging me. I've accepted that that is the situation, and the organization found it prudent to remove me. So if it happens that whether it's the Premier or the MECs there is change, it should be looked at the factors that contributed towards that. But as I'm saying, for us, we're more interested in having a functioning government. For instance, when Comrade Gwede addressed us, he reflected on the state of affairs in government and also at local level. And to some extent, it will also deal with me as a responsible MEC for COPTA, responsible for local government. And the question would be, what did you do when all these issues were happening and all that, or, you know? So I'm saying this is not just a simple matter that you will then say this and that, but it's something that the ANC will apply itself objectively and come up with a better determination in the best interest of the people of the Free State, not of any individual in this case. So we're not going to put the interest of individual members of the ANC, but the interest of the people of this province should count for something.
Mr. Tugwana, let me thank you once again for your time, and all the best to you and your leadership team.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Well, the ANC has to deal with this issue of two centers of power in the provinces of the Free State and KwaZulu-Natal. Well, that's what observers say needs to happen. Premiers in both provinces have failed to win ANC provincial conferences. In the Free State, Premier Sisi Ntombela is the latest to find herself on the back foot politically, as she has not been voted onto the Provincial Executive Committee. Take a look at that story by Samkele Maseko. And that's how we say goodbye to you.
Umasilwa amongst ourselves, then we are weak. The good thing here in KZN, as I said right at the beginning, you've always been able, even after conferences, to put yourself together, to unite yourself so that we can move forward. So you've been like the leaders on the restoration of the vibrancy of our organizational life. But it also means that it must cascade down. It must go to our branches.
ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa cautioned the party's structures on divisions, disunity, and fighting amongst themselves over positions. Two centers of power which often arise when the provincial premier and the party chairperson is not the same person, generally creates problems about whose authority is taken by those deployed in government as MECs. Free State Premier Sisi Ntombela failed to win the ANC conference this past weekend against newly elected provincial chairperson Mxolisi Tukwana, who was praised by party president Cyril Ramaphosa.
Bayivusile ANC and bayayivusa. It's becoming alive and the branches are now breathing. They are now going to become more active. They are now going to become more involved in the lives of our people. So that must be the agenda throughout the country. If there ever was a time when the ANC branches must come alive, branches, the ANC, Yagatambo, Yagamandela, this is the time when we must make sure that our branches are alive.
Free State Premier Sisi Ntombela says she cannot now raise concerns over Tukwana as they work together in government. Tukwana is the MEC of Human Settlements and COCTA, but is now also the boss politically in the ANC.
I've worked with him. I cannot complain now about him. I've worked with him. I know him, so I don't have any problem. But please, what I'm asking him to do is to make sure that he unites the comrades in the Free State. He must not take sides.
In KwaZulu-Natal, Siboniso Duma is the boss politically, and Premier Nomusa Dube is in charge of the provincial government. Duma insists there are no two centers of power, as the authority in the ANC is not with individuals.
I think we just have to debunk and demystify the myth that there are powers that are lying somewhere. There is only one power when it comes to the ANC. The strategic center is the ANC and only the ANC. And there are comrades who will be deployed from time to time to the state, and those comrades report direct to the ANC. So there are no contradictions. We are working very nice with Comrade Nomusa as deployed as the premier, and she does understand that the ANC remains the center, and that's where she takes her authority, that's where she takes the mandate and the directive. And so far we've been complementing each other. We know that doomsayers.
The two centers of power theory in the ANC saw Sihle Zikalala stepping down as the premier last year in August after losing the provincial conference. David Makhura in Gauteng also resigned after stepping down as provincial chairperson. And time will tell on the future of Sisi Ntombela in the Free State after being dealt a huge political blow this past weekend. Samkele Masego, SABC News, Johannesburg.